You, me, and HIFMB. Stories of Science and the Sea.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the HIFMB podcast. Today I had Mita Mahato here, and she's our artist in residence. So she, together with a collaboration with the Hanse-Wissenschaftskolleg in Delmenhorst and our HIFMB, we have a fellowship for artists that she applied for and got. And she talks to us about the work she is doing here, the work she had been doing. So something like a poem called Lullaby that she did. Or comics work. It's a mix of comics and poetry. And of course we talk about her life. So without further ado, I give you Mita Mahato to be the first artist on our channel. Hello and welcome to the HIFMB podcast, everybody. Today we have Mita Mahato from Seattle. Hello.
Yes. Hi.
How you going?
Good.
Yeah?
How are you?
Yeah, excellent. I'm good. So you're our artist in residence. It says on the, do you have a door? I wanted to say on the door.
No. No, I'm floating.
Okay,
around,
all right.
So I have many doors.
Yeah, so on your label it says artist in residence.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It means that I am here. I mean, kind of very basically, it means that I'm an artist and I'm working here with the researchers at HIFMB on different art projects over the duration of the residency.
Yeah.
And so part of that involves developing community programs that are using art as a way to think about people's relationships to water and marine biodiversity. So we've been doing a couple of workshops with which is kind of they do after school programs for girls. And then I'll be doing a workshop for school teachers, primarily in the sciences, but it was kind of a broad call to anybody who wanted to participate. That is kind of introducing different artistic strategies to help students approach issues related to climate change in ways that they may not have before. I think that students today particularly are bombarded with, just the burden of climate change.
Yeah.
And just to kind of think about, are there artistic processes that might help them think about it in different ways? And even if it's just to support their emotional health when it comes to dealing with that stuff. And then I'm also working on my own art project based on the kinds of conversations that I've been having while I've been here. And that's been really exciting too. So being an artist in residence means a lot of things. Sometimes it can mean just working, but I think on an art project. But I think what's been really exciting here is that work has involved a lot of really interesting conversations with the researchers here. So, yeah.
So yeah, because you mentioned the time while you've been here. How long have you been here?
Since early January.
And you're leaving us?
In 3 weeks.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I know. So almost 4 months.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed your time so far?
So much.
Yeah?
So much, yeah.
Despite the weather, despite coming here in winter.
The weather is so similar to Seattle. So,
right.
So that didn't take that much getting used to. But of course, it's always like, oh, where is the sun? And then it's a sunny day and you just spend it sitting in the sun. But in some ways it's good for work, because you don't get tempted to go outside.
Yeah, exactly. Are you from Seattle? Are you a Seattler?
Seattleite.
Seattleite. Okay, right.
I mean, I've lived there for a long, long time, so it feels like home, but I was originally born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest of the United States. Yeah. My parents immigrated there from India. And so I feel like a Midwesterner at heart, but then we moved to California, and then I went to graduate school in Oregon, and then I moved up to Seattle. So yeah,
I'm not really good with U.S. accents, but is your accent typical Seattle or what is it?
It floats.
Okay,
so sometimes you hear a little bit of a Midwestern vowel sound coming out. Like I'll have really long vowels sometimes. Sometimes the California definitely comes through.
Okay.
Like I'll start talking kind of like that valley girl kind of creeps in. And then sometimes I think Seattle is largely like a neutral accent, maybe. I don't know if there's such thing as a neutral accent, but yeah. So yeah, I think my accent kind of sneaks around here and there.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned the work that you've been doing from collaboration or from talking to scientists here. Can you talk about it? Or
absolutely. So I had to apply for this residency, and during the application process, they asked us to submit a proposal for what we would be working on here. The project that I submitted was on whale fall, which I just suddenly became fascinated with. It's when a dead whale sinks to the bottom of the ocean floor, and it just develops this incredible ecosystem of its own. And some of the species that have been found on whale fall are only found on whale fall.
Yeah.
And it just became a really interesting way for me to think about marine biodiversity, and also to think kind of expansively about things like extinction and evolution, things about the passage of time, things about life and death. So that was the project that I had in mind.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to be really open depending on who I would meet here and what their specialties would be.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of looking for what is that in between, like with this interest in whale fall and then what I'm going to encounter. And one of the things that I started kind of thinking about in this project, I'm working with letter forms. And yeah, I started thinking about DNA, which we use letters to indicate these bases. And then I was talking to Dr. Silke Lachman, and I showed her one of the pieces that I was working on, and she was like, "Oh," and she said, "This looks like what color-coded DNA sequencing looks like."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So she showed me an image of that, and so now I've been kind of incorporating DNA sequencing into the work.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it's been really challenging because I'm not a scientist, and so I've had to kind of learn a little bit about, as much as possible, about that whole process. And that's been really fun. But, Zilka has talked about, how much of a pain it can be to cross-check sequences.
Oh, yes.
And I've run into that too now because I'm cutting out these letters that are part of the DNA sequence. And then it's like, oh no, that's supposed to be an A, not a T, So it's been kind of a fun challenge to incorporate
you can feel
thinking.
the pain.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's cool. Like, you mentioned cutouts. That's like one of your main things.
Yeah, media. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It also mentioned like the what you presented to us in one of our seminars, I think was Lullaby.
Right.
Yeah, and that is that a poem with cutouts?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So Lullaby, it's about there's a unique culture of whales that lives in the Puget Sound, which is this body of water near Seattle where I live. And it's the southern resident orcas. And they are considered an endangered species. And Lullaby is responding to, this happened a few years ago. One of the mothers lost her calf soon after it was born and was pushing it through the water for about 17 days.
I've heard that story,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah,
until
exactly.
it was like basically bones when she pushed around,
Right. And so because I've done a lot of work, artistic work on whales, a lot of people were asking, what do you think of the story? What do you think of the story? And so this Lullaby was my response to that. And so all of the images that you see are made of cut paper, and it's actually also cut newsprint. So even like the solid colors, it's coming from the areas of advertising that are just kind of like pink or just black. So it's all kind of recycled paper as well.
Wow. And is it like when you make one of those orcas, is it always a cutout orca that is already on the page, or do you put it together from? I
put it together.
Right,
so I start out with, it kind of works the way that maybe like a sewing pattern would work. So I draw out the image first, and then on tracing paper, and then I use that on the paper to cut it out. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but so it's all kind of like there is a drawn version of it. Sometimes I do freehand. And then use that as the basis to cut the paper.
Right.
Yeah. And then paste it together.
So you mentioned when you presented this to us that it's the panels largely represent comics.
Yeah.
And that's one of your things, isn't it? Like comics poetry. And sometimes you write it with a CS and sometimes with an X. What's the significance there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I definitely consider myself a comics artist, even though I think that, like, if you look at Lullaby, for instance, I don't know if somebody would say, "Oh, that's a comic," at first glance. But I think that comics is a medium that I'm really drawn to because it is all about kind of putting different ways of representing something into conversation with each other. And so for me, I'm really drawn to comics that are not associated with kind of like, I don't know, most people when you think comics, you think of superheroes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Exactly. So definitely not kind of like the DC, Marvel, Spider-Man kind of thing. And so kind of like the underground comics of the 1960s, 1970s. So if you think of like R. Crumb, Harvey Pekar, Art Spiegelman, they kind of like referred to comics with the X. And so it's a way of showing kind of my alignment with that kind of vein of comics that's more about counterculture and more about cultural critique rather than just kind of like mainstream narratives. But it's also, for me, it's a way to emphasize the mix part of comics because it is about mixing word and image. And for me, collage, so mixing different papers together, different textures, different colors. Right. So it's a way for me to emphasize that.
When did you develop this comics fascination?
Oh, I think, it goes back to when I was really little. I think like, as kids, we read the funnies, right? Yeah. And so I think, it started there. And then when I was in college, I got really into Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. But then I started teaching comics and, just kind of to introduce, in my introduction to literature courses, I would always have kind of a graphic novel or a graphic memoir to introduce students to these different ways that writers talk about their experiences. And I started developing that more and more. And then there came a point where I knew the medium so well that I decided to try it myself. And then it just exploded from there. Yeah. So I think, it's been a lifelong fascination, but always kind of, or usually as a reader. And then I started making them and it was like, oh, why haven't I been doing this my whole life?
Okay. And do you like most of the comics I've seen by you are with these cutouts? Is that always like, do they always come together when it's a comic, it's a cutout? Or
yeah, usually. Yeah. I've done a few that are kind of more heavy on the drawing, and usually when that's the case, it's more kind of comics journalism.
Right. Okay.
And that's because you just have to convey so much information. Yeah. And yeah, usually what drives the imagery, it tends to be the cutout material. Yeah.
And maybe like taking Lullaby, for instance, the publication process. I'm completely new to this kind of art, and how does it work? Yeah.
It really varies. I think it's interesting because in the realm of kind of literary publications, with journals like, so Lullaby is published in a literary journal called Shenandoah, and I think that there has been an increasing interest in publishing comics and not just kind of straightforward poetry or prose. And so in many cases, it's just been such an honor that I get an invitation to submit something. And that was the case for Lullaby.
All right.
And in other cases, it's more kind of like a standard submission process where it's like, oh, I really want to submit to this journal. And so I'll make something or send in a pitch of something that I could make.
Okay.
So it kind of varies depending on the project.
Yeah. Okay, and you also have another piece of work which is called Alligator Gut, which sparked my interest because it's, at first I thought, because somewhere on the website it said about lost and disappearing animals, and then I thought, are alligators endangered? And but now you actually told me that it's something completely different, which I could have guessed from the title. But yeah, I'll let you talk, sorry.
Yeah, so Alligator Gut, I got an invitation to publish this piece as well from a different editor, same journal. But the ask was the specific issue was on the theme of survival. And so I started thinking about survival. Yeah. And there's kind of like a standard idea one has about survival, and it's kind of a very loaded term and an important term for a lot of people. What my mind went to at that time was plastic, because this is a material that we've created that will probably outlast all of us, And so I started thinking about that as the focus. And then I remembered hearing when I was little, I was really into animal documentaries when I was little. I guess I still am. But I remembered watching a video, a documentary where they were talking about how acidic the stomach environment is of alligators and crocodiles and caimans. Yeah. And then I was reading all these stories about how, their stomach environments are so acidic that they can digest most anything, but plastic bags and things like that are being found whole in alligators' guts, and in some cases are leading to their deaths.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to put kind of like those two things in conversation together, this long survival of this species up against this kind of material that we've created. And so that's kind of the basis for this piece. And it's a visual erasure poem. And so what I've done is I've cut out the words from an existing text and left behind just a few words that form the basis of the poem. The original text was a journal article, actually.
Oh, wow, okay.
And the article was about, this is kind of funny, but the article was about the effectiveness of art about environmental causes.
Wow, okay.
So yeah, I was playing with that as well.
Let's talk about this next, because that's a major theme I wanted to ask you as well. So like I've talked about this with our other artist in residence, Geraint, and like philosophically, I find it super helpful now that we have art coming in as a form of outreach, and that it's more considered because it's been largely underestimated, I think, for the climate message, for the plastics message, any environmental message. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating, and I think you're right that like one of the many things that I love about here is that you get people from so many different disciplines coming together, so it's not just kind of like, okay, here's this one group that's going to try to tackle all of these issues, but like understanding the value of coming in with these different disciplinary perspectives, which also opens up kind of like each of us come from different communities or have different people in mind when we're thinking about why we care about these issues.
Yeah, exactly.
So finding those intersections. And I do think that art can be a really helpful way to just get a slightly new perspective on something, to see something in ways that you wouldn't have before, and also to invite other people who might not feel like they have expertise on something to kind of contribute their perspective as well. So that's something that I'm really interested in as well.
Yeah. So I definitely think that like it's a super powerful delivery that might resonate, or where the message then might resonate with people that otherwise wouldn't have been reached.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they always have lullaby at the back of their minds and think about orcas because of that, or plastics with alligator gut.
Right.
And super helpful. Did you have anything other than the DNA stuff that you mentioned before that you have coming out of this trip?
Oh yeah, so much. I mean, so I've been meeting bi-weekly with the governance group here too, and that's been really, really fascinating because it feels like, so many of the things that I think about when I'm making art, everybody here is having those same kinds of conversations, but now I'm kind of getting it with a different vocabulary or a different disciplinary perspective or a different application. And that's helping me to see what I work on in different ways as well, so it's just been really useful to have that kind of like multiple, I don't know, just these variations in perspective.
Yeah, the multiple disciplines, exactly, and perspectives like yours make such an important puzzle piece in this that I don't know why for years it hasn't been considered, but now I'm super happy that it's here and that you're working with us. Yeah. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but a little bit about you as a person and your life. Were you always an artist, or how did all this start for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like when I was little, I would draw all the time, and it's funny again to think about this, but I had a notebook where on one side of the page I would draw an animal, and on the other side of the page I would write a poem about that animal.
Really? Oh, nice.
Yeah, but it's funny because then that completely disappeared.
Okay.
For many, many years, and it was in college. I thought that I was planning on majoring in creative writing, and then I took a class, and the professor completely just like scared me out of it.
Okay.
And so I went into instead studying literature rather than writing it,
Oh, okay.
And so then, I went to graduate school in English literature, but still, was kind of interested in how work was written, and then just slowly started developing my own practice. You know, there's something interesting when you like know a medium or a form so well, you know all the theories behind it, and you have all of kind of like, oh, this is exactly how this text works that somebody else has done. And so you have kind of like the vocabulary and all of that to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I decided to do. It's like, okay, why am I complaining about how this person is doing it? Why don't I just do it myself?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Nice.
So that's kind of what happened for me.
Yeah.
I just ended up, starting to make art myself. So very much self-trained,
Yeah.
you know, but also have taken workshops and you know, just gotten some minimal formal training, but really very much kind of self-trained artist.
Yeah. The professor, how did they scare you out of it?
So, I mean, on the first day of class, he came in and said, you know, not all of you will be writers. Many of you will be getting some bad grades from me. So very much was like trying to scare us, you know, to weed us out. I think he even used that word weeding out, or those words. And it just didn't feel like he weeded me out, you know. It didn't feel like a nourishing environment. And that was also why when I went into teaching, I wanted to kind of, you know, not be that teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because not everybody will end up being a writer, but that isn't for you to decide on the first day of a class, you know?
Yeah. So that was in your first degree, in your bachelor's degree in the University of California?
Exactly,
in San Diego. Yeah. Nice. And then you moved from that to Oregon?
Exactly, for my MA and PhD.
Yeah, okay, nice. Yeah. How long is a PhD in your field?
Average 6 years.
Okay, oh wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, that includes the MA.
Yeah.
So it was 2 years of MA and then another 4 years towards the PhD.
MA is Masters of Arts?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay,
exactly.
Right. And what was your thesis or what did you write about?
Yeah, so it was on the 19th century novel, British novel. So I looked...
Is it just called British novel?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So I was focusing on, I focused on Jane Austen.
Okay, right.
And, right, and George Eliot. I had a chapter on Stoker, and then a few other things here and there. But my focus was actually on, it was called Gothic Pathologies.
Okay.
And so I was looking at the eruption of the Gothic in these really realist texts, and how they were always linked to some form of illness.
Okay. That's specific.
And yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I've always been kind of interested, I guess, in the way that scientific discourse is instructing narrative discourse. And I think that still is working its way through my work, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
But the chapter on Dracula, I had a subspecialty in film studies as well. And so I was also looking at cinematic representations of vampires also. And I think that element, the kind of the interest in cinema, that's really what stuck with me as I started teaching. And so when I actually kind of went into teaching, a lot of the classes that I taught were, rather than being about the British novel, were about film.
Okay. Did you first start teaching no, not in Oregon? Oh no, do you have to teach during your PhD?
Yeah, I mean, some of us, we had the opportunity to teach during graduate work, which of course is like really time consuming, but it's nice because then you get money to pay the bills, you know, and the experience too, of being in a classroom. So I started teaching there as a graduate student.
Okay. And then you moved to Puget Sound again, or to the University of Puget Sound?
Yeah, I had a 1-year visiting professorship in a very small town in Eastern Washington, and then I moved to the University of Puget Sound after that. Yeah.
Eastern Washington is then Washington State.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Right. No. I'm always I'm very bad with American states. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you know, it's like Washington is a state over here, and then there's Washington D.C., which is something totally different. So yeah. I sympathize.
Okay, thanks. Okay, then in University of Puget Sound, which we talked about, what Lullaby is based on.
Right.
And then you became you got tenure in 2011?
Right.
Yeah, okay, right. And then did that for another 8 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Was it to your liking that you stayed that long?
I mean, it's funny. I was talking about this with somebody else the other day. You know, I love teaching so much. That's like one of the things, along with like art making practice, it's like it feels like something that's just in me, you know, and it's like I feel like I could teach for the rest of my life. You know?
Nice.
And so I think that part of the job was absolutely to my liking, you know, and I felt really passionate about it and all that stuff. But, you know, like you're saying, I mean, that's a long time to be in one place.
Yeah.
And that is the way that tenured professorships go. And in some ways, there's good reason for that. But I think also it was kind of around year 8, year 9, where I was kind of like, oh, you know, should I try something else while I'm still young and you know, can try something else? And so it was kind of like, you know, it's a big deal to leave a tenured position.
Yeah.
And not the standard thing, but it also just felt like the right time. And so, yeah, I left.
Yeah. And it says since 2012, you are basically self-employed as an artist. So you
2017 or 2018, I think, is when I left the tenured position. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And basically then made art or being a self-employed artist your main profession, or?
Yeah, I mean, I did have I worked for the last 3 years at an art museum doing public programming. So a lot of the things that I did as a professor in terms of developing community programs and working with artists, working with some university students as well. So a lot of similar things. But yeah, the reason why I took that job was to kind of have more alignment with my work as an artist.
Yeah. Okay, right.
Yeah.
And you also became a board chair in that year at the Short Run in Seattle?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So Short Run. So this is an organization that I've been with, I think, since 2012, actually. So it's
oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
Maybe I got my notes wrong.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah. So Short Run is this amazing nonprofit organization in Seattle that focuses on comics and community programs. And so we run a yearly festival. And it's kind of like become a fixture in Seattle now. Everybody really looks forward to going.
When is it?
It's in usually November.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so we invite artists from all over the world, comics artists, to have their comics, sell their comics at the festival. And yeah, we have programming around it too. We have a comics residency that we run every year. That's happening right now, actually. We do summer school, summer classes, and all kinds of programming and exhibitions around comics through the year. Yeah.
So the summer schools you mentioned, are they similar to the workshop? I know you're running the workshop that you mentioned before for teachers here, for instance.
Yeah,
Similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of the classes that we have run are designed for people who are already doing comics, but we do teach classes that are for kind of sometimes younger kids, sometimes for seniors. Yeah, and so it really kind of varies. I'm really excited when I go back to kind of continue to do the workshops that I've been doing here that might be for school teachers or specific groups like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, then the this fellowship, so the fellowship and residency in arts with HWK, so the HWK, the
Hanse-Wissenschaftskolleg.
Yeah, thanks. Hanse-Wissenschaftskolleg. So that came up. And why did you pick this one?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So a friend of mine shared. There was a call for artists for this Art Waves residency, and she shared it with me, knowing that I have a really deep interest with marine ecosystems. And I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I have to apply for this. So when I saw that, it just made sense for me. And I've been working for the last, 5 years on a book project that came out of a different residency. And that project is largely finished now. And so it seemed like the perfect time to come here and kind of think about, okay, what's next for me?
Yeah.
You know? And really it's like the project that I'm working on DNA, I have like a small piece that will be finished at the end of this month, but I really kind of look at that project as something that will be long term.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a small piece of it, but that feels like just the beginning. So yeah, this residency was just like, it's one of those things that this was made for me. So.
Yeah. But what sparked your interest in oceans to begin with? Is it the vicinity in Seattle, or?
I think that's part of it. I get asked that question and I don't know what the answer is because it just feels like almost innate. I mean, when I lived in Wisconsin, we grew up near a lake, Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes. And then, in California, it was close to an ocean too. But like, I don't know if there is like a specific reason other than just feeling very drawn to it. That being said, like, I'm also drawn to like forested environments too, so it's not limited to the ocean.
Exactly, yeah.
But definitely there's something there where and part of it might be just that, like with Lullaby, it's just an interesting challenge to kind of think about an environment where we don't have the same kind of foothold that we might feel like we have on land. There's something about being shaken up and like, how do I navigate here and being outside of your comfort zone? So that might be part of it too.
Yeah. And with the DNA project, where will you publish this and where can we see it?
So this first part of it, I was invited to submit to this really incredible literary journal called Ecotone. And they focus on like place is what they kind of have in their boilerplate explanation of who they are, but they're really doing wonderful work on spreading the word about the environment and environmental justice issues. And so I was really honored when I got kind of like, will you submit? And I was like, yes, I'm working on this project actually. And so that should be out, I think, sometime in June.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Will it be online and open access or?
Yeah, I think it's like for the first 2 weeks that the publication is out, it's available to everybody.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll be sure
Excellent.
to spread the word when it comes out.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, we will too on the podcast on Twitter or something.
Excellent.
Yeah, and with that, I just wanted to ask what's next for you. So where will you go? Will you go back to Seattle or what's?
Yeah, so I'll return home to Seattle to my partner and my old cat.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, in June, actually, I have another very much shorter residency, just a 2-week residency. But this one is the kind of residency where you just kind of put your head down and work. In Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'll be in a little cabin in Alaska.
Oh, shit.
And the reason I'm really excited about this residency, the second residency now, is it'll give me time to process everything that I've been learning here.
Yeah, great.
And to map out this larger whale fall project that I have in mind.
So that's still happening for you?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, nice.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I'm picturing something really expansive.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
but,
same.
But yeah, and then just continuing to work on this project and a few others, and seeing what's next. Hopefully, I'll come back and see the new building when it's it's open.
Yeah, please do.
Totally.
I wish you best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So with that, we're done with my questions. Is there anything that you want to highlight or that you want to mention that we haven't talked about?
Oh, wow. Gosh.
Just if anything comes to mind.
Yeah.
It doesn't
No.
need to. Easy. Okay, cool.
I mean, there probably is, but
No, if it comes up, we'll talk later again.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Cool. Thanks so much, Mita.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yeah, thanks. See you around. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Want to dive deeper? Surf over to hifmb.de or follow us on Twitter at hifmb_OL.